Hey everybody, you are listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast, Episode 6, with me, your host, Simple Electronics. With me I have a special guest, Tim from Don't Give Up. How's it going, Tim?
It's going fine, then.
Obviously the listeners are going to know a little bit about me already, so yeah, just let them know about you.
Right. From my accent, you'll gather that I'm in the UK. I'm also a pensioner, 73 years old, and I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel called Don't Give Up, which is aimed at myself, essentially, because I start all sorts of projects and I never finish them.
Hopefully you don't give up on them, though.
Yes. Well, I tend to give up in the sense that they sit on the shelf for months. And then I think, what did I want that for? What was I going to do with that? Okay. This is a fairly recent thing with me, the electronics things, which makes it more difficult because I've been only doing it for 8 years. So how should I put it? My learning capabilities have deteriorated since I was 20 or 30 or 40. I find things harder to learn, harder to retain. Okay?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But let me tell you, you don't sound a day over 60. So you're doing fairly well.
Yes, I try to keep young. To my children, I'm an aging hippie because I've got long hair and a long beard.
I used to have a long hair and long beard, but since I'm going back to work teaching, I had to shave off the caveman look, so now I'm looking a little bit more professional. So how does someone your age get started in electronics? Like, let's say one of the viewers out there is a man in his 70s or a woman in her 70s. Where would you point them as a good resource, a good place to get started?
I think the way I did it's probably best. I have always been interested in computers. And when the Raspberry Pi came out, the idea of this baby-sized computer at a very cheap cost fascinated me. So I got one and got interested in programming it. And then, because I've programmed on and off all my life, or since all my adult life, but I haven't done electronics. And then I thought, well, it's got these GPIO pins. People say you can use them for doing this, that, and the other. And that's what got me interested, I think, making more use of the things I've got.
Oh, yeah. So I totally agree with that kind of philosophy because, you see, I learned how to program very simply, very easily, and very basic stuff in high school. And I decided it was time, to learn programming later on in life as well, because it's just the basics I got. I used to program in Visual Basic, so it's basically you drag objects onto the screen type programming. But I like the idea of the Raspberry Pi because in my mind it would be easier to learn programming if I could make a real world effect out of it, if I can get something tangible to come out of basically writing software. So I like the idea of it, but being in Canada, the Raspberry Pi was extremely expensive to get my hands on. It's not cheap, and even today it's not cheap. I can't even get a Pi Zero for under $30-something.
Good grief.
Yeah, but they're made in the UK, aren't they?
They're made in Wales, in the Sony factory in Wales. Although they do make some in Japan and some in China, because the demand is so high.
Absolutely.
I mean, they've got phenomenal sales.
Have you ever played with the BBC Microbit, or is it mainly the Raspberry Pi for you that you got started with?
Well, I started with the Raspberry Pi for programming, and then I got interested in the Arduino, and I've been using the Arduino, and I've moved on to the ESP8266 and the ESP32, because the ESP32 is a great advantage, because it's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It's a much more powerful processor than the Arduino, so it can do unlimited amount of stuff. And it's more useful for dealing with peripherals than the Pi is. The Pi is a desktop almost that's got the GPIO pins on the side. That's an extra on it. Whereas the ESP32, that's built for its GPIO pins.
Absolutely. That's right. So yeah, the Raspberry Pi can be called a system on a chip, basically. So it's an entire thing. It's got a lot of RAM, it's got a graphics card, it's got all that stuff. And
Yeah.
then as an added bonus, you get the GPIO. But yes, you're right. The ESP and the Arduino and the PIC microcontrollers, those things are designed from the ground up to interface with the world around them, which is the big advantage for sure.
Yeah.
What's the I would say what's the most ambitious project that you've started for an ESP type microcontroller?
I am starting, it's just about getting off the ground, is if I put the background to this, I'm a, as I said, a pensioner living on his own. Okay. And with the present situation, it is worse. I don't see people from one week to another. You don't get visitors at the moment or anything like that.
And the present situation, just for the listeners out there, is the coronavirus. We're recording this I'm guessing at the tail end, I'm hoping, of the coronavirus, but we don't know yet.
No, well, I suspect that we've got the winter to come, so I'm not too hopeful. But anyway, it also applies when the other situation. And you hear these situations that somebody has died in their flat, and 3 weeks later, somebody notices the smell.
Yeah, that's it's sad reality of living on your own sometimes.
Yes. Now, Ralph Bacon's channel, he's done what he calls a Home Alone project, which basically, which what it does, it monitors movement in his mother's flat. If they don't get if movement stops for any length of time other than when she's in bed, it sends an alarm, sends a message to him and I think his other siblings, and they can ring mum up and see if everything's all right. And if they don't get a response, they can go around. So it's a check, a safety check for somebody on their own. It's a bit like these emergency buttons that elderly people, I don't know if it happens in Canada, but we have a system here where you can subscribe to an emergency service and you carry around this sort of button that if you fall over or you need immediate help, you push the button and that sends an alarm to a switchboard somewhere.
Yeah, I think you can subscribe to something like that in Canada as well.
Yeah.
So are you saying you've built this program?
No, I've got the basis. I've got all the bits I need for it, and I've tested bits of it because I think when you're building a project, what you've got to do is, and this comes down from my programming background, is that you've got to break a project down into little bits, into units. You test that one bit and see if that works. Get that working. Don't worry about anything. Then you test another bit. Then you end up with, say, half a dozen or a dozen, or if it's a big computer program, it may be 100 blocks, and then you do the process of linking them together.
Yep, that's completely true. And that's if you're listening from home, that's a really good way to climb a mountain, so to speak, when it comes to projects that that seem over your head. Just do it one step at a time and then link the bits together.
Yes. Yeah. If you need to turn a light on, the first thing you've got to do is, how can I control a switch? Don't worry about the lights the first thing or ever. You break it down to really simple steps. And I think the good way of thinking about it is to think about that these microcontrollers and computers are dumb. They're stupid.
They are.
And you've got to tell them exactly what you want to do. You've got to break things down into very simple steps.
I tell my students the very same thing because I teach automotive at a trade college, and I teach fuel and electrical, and so all these engine management systems, my students believe that they're too complex, but I tell them the systems are actually stupid. If you short a sensor to its 5-volt logic reference, the vehicle will think that sensor is fully pinned in one direction. So the vehicle will compensate all the other systems because it thinks that one sensor is pinned all the way. It is stupid. It only knows what you put in. That's it. If it wouldn't know, it wouldn't, if it can't physically check something, it has to rely on its sensors, basically.
Yes, yes. And I think the other trick with programming, certainly trick with programming, is to realize that the things we do automatically, like if I say I'm going to go out to the supermarket, I don't think about what I'm going to do. The automatic things, getting up, getting, a bag, getting my wallet and going out to the supermarket. But if I had to write down exactly what I have to do, down to every single step, like opening the front door, locking the front door, turning left, going 100 yards, turning right. That's what a computer needs. It's as simple as that.
Oh yeah, like that basic. And actually, I had this discussion with a friend of mine not too long ago. He has a young child at his house. I think his kid's now 3. And I said, well, if you throw something at your kid like a ball, your kid, at 3 years old, something like half the time, the kid just reaches out and catches the ball with both his hands. But if you were to program a robotic arm to catch that ball, it would take you years and years and years and thousands of lines of code to see the ball, to visualize its trajectory, to calculate its speed, to figure out its mass, and then have an algorithm to close the fingers. And like all this stuff is done automatically in our young brains. Like the basically a beginner at being a human can do it, but it takes some sort of an expert to be able to program something to do it. So our brains do a lot of the thinking without us even realizing, right?
Yes.
And your computer, you have to program it to do all of those little things.
Yeah.
Yeah, just even balancing. Like, have you ever built one of those self-balance robot kits?
No, I'm thinking about doing it. I watched, who was it? I can't remember who it was. Oh, yeah, it's Ralph Bacon. He's just built one.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating idea. And it's quite easy to build.
Yep. It's easy. Like the component count is fairly low and the logic is fairly easy. And there's a lot of examples. But I mean, someone had to write that, and that was not an easy task to write those examples in, right? It's kind of difficult to have a smooth enough power delivery and transition from movement to staying still. That's difficult stuff, really. In software, that's a lot of lines of code.
Yes, yeah, but as you say, a lot of people have written the code for you, which is one of the great advantages of the community around Arduino, the Raspberry Pi, and all the sort of maker stuff. Is there's all this open source software and programs and libraries that people have written.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of open source stuff.
Yes, but I always use somebody's code. I'm no problem using somebody's code, and I'll put in the code who it's from. But I always think it's a good idea to go through the code and understand what is happening, and even alter things to see if they have the effect you think they're going to have.
Absolutely. And that's why...
Because if you understand what's going on rather than just cutting and pasting, you can solve problems.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I'm really happy for people like Another Maker who will take some of the, let's say, less legibly written example codes, and he'll actually comment them out as a guy who understands software, and he'll put it up on his own GitHub page after that.
Yes, I think that's an excellent thing to do. But I think even as for someone like me, for example, if I cut and paste a program for the self-balancing robot, which I know they're out there, and I could put it in and say, all right, that works. I've got it working fine. For me, anyway, the challenge is, why does it work? And I want to look at the code, either to see if I can improve it, or if I alter things, what happens? What's the effect of doing certain things? Or what's the effect of making the wheels bigger? Putting bigger wheels on, or whatever. I think that's the fascination for me. It's not the finished product. It's the playing about. What happens if I do this? It's the child in me.
That's a really interesting perspective. Being not so great at software myself, I'm more than thrilled when it just actually works. So
Yes, but if you not just the software, if you build something, whatever it is, say a robot car, that's sort of classic thing people do first. Well, you can put different sensors on it and work out how, where's the best place to put the sensor and experiment with different things. So you can, the idea being, so you can, for me, is if it goes wrong, I'm more likely to be able to repair it or fix the fault. I think that comes from a background of my childhood of taking things to pieces. I think I was probably the bane of my parents' life. If something could come to pieces, I would take it to pieces.
what were your favorite targets for that?
I think anything. It was even down to sticking knitting needles into a loudspeaker to see what the effect would be.
Oh, wow.
You put knitting needle through the grill of the speaker, and it was an expensive speaker. I don't think my father was too pleased.
No, probably not.
I think there's a bit of blackout memory there. One of the things I don't like about the present age is we live in a throwaway society. If a television stops working, people go out and buy a new one, and the other one gets dumped. And it may be something very simple, which they could fix themselves if they knew how.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm torn a little bit on that. So firstly, it's totally our fault as consumers because we shop primarily by price. I mean, there's something to be said about differentiating features and whatever, but we are so incredibly price driven that manufacturers did a race to the bottom. As cheap as possible, just get it out the door. We're at a point here. Black Friday is a big deal in North America, more so in the States, but a little bit in Canada as well, where companies like Best Buy, so a major electronics retailer, they'll actually bring in different model numbers from their regular manufacturers like Sony or whatever, which will have like cut down HDMI ports. Instead of like 3 HDMI ports on the TV, it'll only have a single one. They'll have a special PCB inside using even cheaper capacitors. They'll have let's say a lower refresh rate, and they have these special part numbers just so they can go on sale on Black Friday because people are that into low prices. The other thing that's happened is that hands-on types of trades have become rarer and rarer. So while the electronics came down in price, the trade skills went up in value, and therefore it really costs you quite a bit to have a repair person take a look at your television to the point where it's cheaper just to throw it away. And I get that sometimes it's just let's say a bulging capacitor, but I guess I don't begrudge people for not knowing about these things, but at the same time, I feel like that's an advantage that we have as enthusiasts, right? We can fix the stuff that people throw away at least.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, that's the thing. But I'm thinking in the modern world when we're looking at things like the environment, how many mobile phones, smartphones do people need? Do they need to buy a new one every year or every 18 months?
I would say definitely not.
Do they need to be manufactured to fall to bits after 13 months or whatever? Will the battery fail?
I find in that regard, I think we're in a good spot because at the moment there are tons of people using 4 or 5 year old smartphones. It seems like the progress made on the smartphone front has not been all that much in the last couple of years. So where I used to have a flagship smartphone every 3 years, that's how it worked here. You basically signed up for a 3-year contract, you got a cheap smartphone. Now I'm using a Google Pixel 3A, so it's a smaller, cut down version. It's not a flagship phone, and I honestly find it is like way faster than I even need. So I've got a budget smartphone that I feel is going to last me longer.
I've got exactly the same phone, actually.
Oh, there we go. We're in the same club.
Yes, but it's things like my mother bought a fridge in 1954. It was still going when in the 1970s. All right, it was a big clunking thing, heavily built, but it was, the last fridge before the one I've got at the moment lasted about 5 years before it sort of rusted and then stopped.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Same with washing machines. They tend to fail. And I think, of course, with washing machines, they're all, as I learned from Big Clive, is they've all got standard parts in them you can replace, So only the outside that's different.
Yeah, I have to say, but again, that comes down to us as consumers. Like, we're shopping by price before anything, and so companies might take a loss on their low end products, and they build that loss into the profit margin of their high end products. And on the inside of that washing machine, the $2,000 one versus the $500 one, it probably shares about 90% of the same parts, but companies need to make a differentiator to be able to make up the money they spend building these things and shipping, especially like shipping these things. It's not trivial to send a washing machine or let's say a truckload of them, across the country, especially here in North America. Canada is massive. UK, not as much. I mean, it's still big, but it's definitely not as big as Canada.
Most of them come from, I presume they come from China now, don't they?
I'm not 100% sure where they're assembled.
Well, the contents of the washing machine probably comes from China.
Oh, yeah, that I have no doubt.
I'm wondering with the present crisis and results of this crisis, whether we're going to go back to more localized manufacturing, actually.
I think there's no better time for it because the maker movement building steam, and more so during the lockdown. If you saw the great things that were happening with people making visors and stuff like that for and ear guards with their 3D printers, I think there's a case to be made for local manufacturing. I know our Prime Minister here, he is penning deals with 3M to start making PPE in Canada. So if this thing ever happens again, Canada won't have any disrupted supply. Is the UK doing something similar?
I'm not sure. We're still in a bit of chaos here, and I'm not sure what's happening in that way. What I would like to see is a real sort of government incentive. For instance, we've got an old primary school down the road which is closed because it merged with another one because the pupil population was low. But there's a massive space in there which could be ideal maker space or workshops. It could turn into workshops. And I would say to, say, electricians and carpenters, I'll give you, as the government or the local authority, I'll give you space for free.
Yeah.
As long as you take on apprentices.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
And train people and give people access, if you like, to... and I think that could come from the maker community, that sort of pressure.
Yeah, 100%. Especially living through a pandemic like we have and we are. For me, for example,
yeah,
I have pretty much everything I need around me, and the skills in my hands are all. I pretty much have anything to survive. Like let's say a mini apocalypse, not an apocalypse, but like a mini event similar to this pandemic. Like I had alcohol on hand, both the drinking and the rubbing type. I have a 3D printer, so I can print kind of whatever. I have CAD packages that I play with, so I can design stuff. I have a little bit of plywood. I have saws. I have all sorts of things. So I have the abilities to help myself. But yeah, people, let's say, living in apartments, like people who live in the downtown, they don't have space to put all this stuff, right? So a makerspace could have been their salvation, where they could have went down there, did things for themselves or helped others, like made things to help others.
Yes, and I think it's the helping others. To be able to go, I don't understand how to do this. To be able to go physically to see somebody and then to show you physically what you need to do, whether say it's repairing a television or whatever it is you want to do. It can be all skills, not just electrics and mechanical and things. It can be down to sewing, knitting, anything.
Absolutely. Adam Savage was saying that sewing and carpentry is the same thing. It's just taking 2D shapes and assembling them in 3D.
And knitting, interestingly enough, was a male occupation first before it became a female occupation.
Yeah, so to me, I think things are so pointlessly gendered. Like, I bought a sewing machine from the local thrift store,
Yeah.
and I won't like out this person, but someone involved in the family in some way, they asked me like, why the heck would you want a sewing machine? And I said, why would I not want a sewing machine? Like I want to know how to sew properly, and this sewing machine was cheap. Like, it's great. And it's not like this person was saying that I was wrong for having a sewing machine, but that person felt it odd that a male in his early 30s wanted to buy a sewing machine. But it's like, the sewing machine is just a welder for cloth. Like, I mean, it's the same thing.
Yes, I think there's an element, to be fair, there's an element, especially with younger people, is that, well, they actually haven't seen it. They haven't seen a sewing machine. So that, what do you want something like this for? It's not something that you see in the shops to buy. It's also a bit like this, where does meat come from? And you'll get the argument from the supermarket.
Yeah. Talk about sheltered existence, huh?
But I don't blame people for that. I think it's bad education or unfortunate education. But I think there's a great element of that. And I think, again, this is where makers can fill the space, go back to using our hands and brains together rather than doing things which are useful to us.
Yeah. And I love the together aspect. I find that starting a YouTube channel has been the greatest thing, because I do have some skills that that not everyone in the general population has, and it's super nice to be able to share those skills.
Yes, and very much appreciated. I enjoy watching them, and you come across as wanting to communicate these things. Those are the channels that I like. It's the enthusiasm of the YouTuber, and if they're talking to you, me, the audience,
Yeah.
rather than thinking, this is just a means for them to generate an income, like some of the very big channels, which is obviously, you can see all the razzmatazz, if you like, the production values.
Yeah, just look on the trending section of YouTube, and you'll see a lot of people. Some of them are very talented, and some really good videos get to the trending section, but the vast majority of the trending section are sort of people who are simply doing YouTube for a career. The people else kind of spark drama for views type thing.
Yes.
But that brings us quite neatly over to a point. I actually met you because I make YouTube videos, and you're actually a Patreon patron of mine. You care to share why you decided to take the plunge and support a small YouTube channel like myself?
Well, it's a question of giving back, I think. I've got benefited from a lot of YouTube channels, and I came across yours. It's very friendly. It was quite small, and it's wanting to progress. And one of the things I wanted to support the channel, but I think there are channels that I very much appreciate, like Big Clive's channel. It's an enormous channel. It's got enormous following, he doesn't need my Patreon. You probably deny that, but he's doing very well for himself, I think.
Yeah, he has over 2,000 Patreon patrons at this point.
Yes. I think this. I thought, all right, I'm going to spend so much money a month on Patreon because I want to give back, because I'm getting all this instruction for free in a sense. I thought it was a small channel that appealed to me. I thought, right, I'm going to. I went for you, and I support two channels, yours and Brian Loch, who's an Irish maker.
You guys can find the links in the description if you need to take a look. But basically, any channel that we speak of on this podcast is worth at least taking a look. And you know what? As a YouTuber, I'll say subscribe if you want to my channel. But the ones that we're talking about are the ones that affect us, and so you should go subscribe to them because it makes a big difference. It truly does.
Yes, because I think a lot of the work that YouTubers do in this field, you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're putting another view on the wheel, another way of describing the wheel or explaining the wheel. And so it is a question of mutual learning across the whole field. You might not appeal to a certain group of YouTube watchers, but appeal to someone like me. The same with any channel.
Yep, I can see clearly by my comment section on the more popular videos that there are a lot of people I don't appeal to. Yet they seem to watch my videos just to want to tell me how little I appeal to them. So, you know,
have they got nothing better to do?
You know, I feel a little sad for some people because they just seem like they're so upset about such simple things like a free YouTube video that they could choose to click off at any time. But yeah, they let me know in the comments, that's for sure.
Yes, and I think you don't suffer as much as some other channels on other subjects like politics and religion.
Yes,
they really do get the trolling and the abuse. And I was watching something live the other day, and I won't mention what it was. You know, it was a live YouTube thing, and you know, you've got the chat down the side, and you've got people sort of arguing with each other down the chat. And I'm thinking, are they actually watching the video?
Probably not.
Are they listening to what this person's saying? They can't be if they're having a chat with each other.
Oh yeah, and Reddit is just like that too, because Reddit could be fantastic and Reddit could be brutal. It's just it depends on who's commenting. And I'm lucky that, especially on my live streams, I'll have to say, the quality of viewer that comes to a Simple Electronics live stream is through the roof. It's they're a really good bunch of people. Some of my Patreon patrons come in. It's hard though, because if I schedule it for North Americans, then it kind of excludes Europeans. If I schedule it for Europeans, it kind of excludes North Americans. That's one of the crappy parts about having a global audience and live streaming. But I find in the live stream, the comments are always positive. It's just the videos that they get served to a larger group. Those people tend to be where the trolls and the people who are just angry, where they come from.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about scheduling your live streams, because I'm quite happy to watch them afterwards. You know, I don't have the need to watch something live, because I don't particularly want. If I want to comment on something, I tend to want to think about what I want to say, and an instant comment is not very good.
You're not living life on the edge, where everything you put out on the internet is recorded.
No, and I don't want to live on that sort of edge.
And that's fair enough. So I guess we kind of like went roundabout, but we're talking about YouTube. So to the viewers out there, is there any YouTubers that you think they really should go check out? I know you don't have to say my channel, because basically I'm gonna start turning red, and that's not a good thing.
Well, the viewers can't see you, can they?
No, they can't, but they'll probably hear it in my voice. But for real, like some really good quality channels. Who do you recommend in the electronic space?
Well, we talked. What I've talked about two. One is bigclive.com.
Love Big Clive.
He is entertaining. he has a vast knowledge. I mean, and he is willing to share that knowledge. He is very willing to share that knowledge. It comes across so much. And if he thinks for people who haven't watched it, lots of his stuff is he buys stuff from eBay, Chinese products. They tend to be on the cheap Chinese things, and he'll pull them to pieces. And if they're crap, he'll say they're crap. And if they're not, if they're a good design or a clever design, he will say that, and he will explain exactly how it works.
Yeah, he's not shy,
No.
and he likes pink things.
Yes.
And he seems to gravitate towards stuff that is intended for countries with far lower safety standards than the UK.
Yes, like sort of bath, electrocuting the baby in the bath, but type.
Yep, that video gets served a lot, actually. I've watched it probably twice already, and it still gets up on my front page quite often.
What about the one with the doll and the firework?
That's never been served to me. I had to go look for it because someone had mentioned it. It's YouTube has never thought that I'd be into dolls, I guess.
That is hysterical, though, that one.
I love it. It's great, and I think it's his most watched video.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, that's his number one, and it really has nothing to do with electronics. It's more just showing you what kind of person Big Clive is.
Yeah. The other one to watch, I would recommend to definitely watch of his, is that there's a video about his mother's Alzheimer's, and this is after she died, and him and his brother looked after her for years, and he talks about Alzheimer's, what it involves, and anybody who is interested in the care of people with Alzheimer's or any form of dementia, go and watch that video. I would recommend it to anybody. It's fantastic, and it shows the real humanity of the man.
Yeah, I personally lived through that. My grandmother on my father's side, she was not diagnosed, so she had either dementia or Alzheimer's, but it was something in that realm, and it's a horrible disease. It's a terrible way to go. I think I take solace in the fact that she probably didn't experience as much pain as the people around her did, because it's a little heartbreaking having for my father having a mother who doesn't remember him. So at least there's that. But yeah, Alzheimer's is rough. It's very rough.
And it's rougher on the carers than it is on the victim.
Yeah, that's the only solace I can take, really, is the thought that it's it's
and
easier.
I think one of the things comes across, I don't want to give too much away, Big Clive's video, is how he talks about how his mother's world got smaller and smaller and smaller until she ended up living in one room.
Yeah.
And that was her world. The other channel I would recommend is another English one, is Ralph Bacon. He might not appeal to everybody, but he tends to do 30-minute videos on one particular project or thing, but he's a very good reference channel. If I need to know about a particular module or how to use a particular module, I will look at his videos probably first.
Yeah, he's kind of a physical GitHub sort of thing.
Yes.
It's he's more of a I've noticed that about his channel. I mean, I pretty much watch all the electronics YouTubers that I've come aware of. Brian Loch, I've actually heard about him recently. In fact, by doing this podcast, because pretty much everyone I interview is talking about Brian Loch in one way or another. So I'm now subscribed to him, and when I get some more time, I'll be able to go through his back catalog. But yeah, Ralph Bacon was I've already been a subscriber. David Watts actually is another good one that
Yes.
I'm enjoying, and his live streams are great because you just feel like you're hanging out with him. Have you caught any of his live streams?
Yes. What I like with David's stuff is he doesn't cover up the mistakes he makes. It's not the live stream, it's expletive something's gone wrong. What have I done wrong? He's that sort of normality sort of comes across. Everybody does something wrong. You write a bit of software and you forget to put a semicolon somewhere, and you're wondering why isn't this working? Why, and you have to search through backwards and forwards. It may take you hours to find it.
Been
And
there.
it's that sort of thing to come. That's one of the reasons I want to. I tend to use the Arduino type code, but I want to use more MicroPython because that is a much simpler language, and you make less mistakes with it.
Yeah, the Arduino, because Arduino is sort of C based, isn't it?
It's C plus.
Yeah, and another maker, being a professional coder, really, that's what he does for a living. He tells me, he's like, as little as I can do in C is where I go. That's why he likes Node-RED a lot, because he says I can just have this, send out a string over serial, and I can get the heck out of the IDE as fast as possible and do the processing in a sensible language, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been trying. MicroPython is something on my list, and I have ESP microcontrollers which are compatible with it. I think they also understand Lua, if I'm not mistaken. There's a Lua compiler for them.
Yeah. Have you got a Windows machine?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. The compiler I use is called, I think it's PieCraft, and it's better than, I find it much easier to use than the shell, because what you do, you actually see what's on your ESP32 or whatever you're programming, and you get instant feedback. That's the great value of Python and MicroPython. With the trouble with the Arduino C+, it has to be compiled, uploaded. Oh, something's got wrong. So you've got to go through it all again, compile it, upload it. Well, it doesn't need recompiling with MicroPython. You just shove the file across, run it, working, not working, bang, you go. But it's quicker and easier. It's just getting used to a slightly different language.
I actually took some Python classes online back when Code Academy was free, and Python. It seemed simple, but again, it's a new language. It's a different language, so you have to learn the syntax and what the main commands are, and how the math is laid out and stuff like that. But yeah, and
I think what you need to do with it, any programming language, you've got to, if you want to really get your hands around it, is not use any other language while you're doing it. So immerse yourself in it for whatever length of time you need, and it'll then come more naturally.
That makes sense.
It's a bit like you're saying with the Node-RED and MQTT stuff. That's the way I would tackle a language, and that's where I first got back into programming when I first before I retired, by going back to web design using PHP and MySQL, and just to immerse myself. I think I did is it lynda.com course on it?
Yeah, lynda.com. Yeah.
I went through it and I went through it. And I wrote different websites on my machine. Bang, 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 bang. And I now find it easy to write a website. I don't use PHP anymore. I use one of these self-build it things. I forgot the word, what it is.
Like WordPress or something like that?
I use WordPress. Yes. What is? I forgot what. No, it'll come.
Yeah. Do you mean like a service, like a website service?
It's a frame builder. It's a way of building pages.
Yeah, you got me lost there, because back in the day I used to heard about like Dreamweaver and stuff like that, but I don't know.
It's not. It's a program that sits on the website and it runs the website. So you design pages, and all you do is pump them, and you can write the text in and it'll all flow simply. It's a series of templates. If I think this is the problem with being 73 in memory, I'm trying to think of the word. It might come to me by the end.
Yeah, it may have things to do with being 73, but I feel like I'm in your situation almost daily for one thing or another.
Yes. How many times do you go to the kitchen and think, what did I come here for?
At least once a day. At least. I mean, I have to say, so I commend you on being in your 70s and learning stuff. I'm assuming virtually every day, especially in electronics, because I definitely feel a slowdown from when I was 18. I definitely feel that I'm not 18 anymore. A little bit harder to sort of figure out like working at problems, for example. Like if I have something that I'm facing right now and I have to figure out my way around. I've gotten better at the web searching, but I'm not as good at putting, having two and two in front of me and putting them together. Is that sort of how you feel?
I think it's more of when you learn things when you're younger, it becomes, if you like, muscle memory. It's like learning to type. If you learn to type when you're young, most people can then touch type and that stays with them. If you're 17, your first time you're facing a keyboard, and you have to, then somebody in 70 is never they're going to have to think about what they're doing all the time. It's like if I want to write a program in MicroPython tomorrow, I will have to have the reference cards beside me, and probably I tend to have a book as well on what is the function that does this. I have to look it up. That memory sort of thing that is not there anymore. It's not the easy flow. I think that's the problem. But the other thing about learning, which I want to say, is that the day I stop wanting to learn about things is the day they can put me in my coffin.
Yeah.
I think we spend our life, that is the point. One of the things that keeps us going is to keep learning, whatever it is. And don't expect to climb Everest when you're 70. But if you can do something small and do it well, that's an achievement that you should be proud of.
Oh, yeah. And I think as a society, I think we're really hard on ourselves. At some point, you have to think, yeah, if something was difficult for you and you've achieved it, that's a positive thing, and you need to be proud of that. You need to look not at what other people are doing that's better than you, but look at what other people are doing that's worse than you, for example. And so I would say, if you're a person, for example, that's inspired by this podcast and you want to make a YouTube channel, I would say make one. And if you feel like your videos aren't as good as X, Y, and Z's videos, I'll tell you there are more people whose videos are worse or non-existent than there are that are better than yours. Like, you have to give yourself the credit where credit is due. That some things are very difficult, and if, like starting a YouTube channel, for example, and if you've done it, pat yourself on the back because you deserve it.
Yes. I'll take that on board. But it's getting this. I think it's important. If you're starting electronics and things, and you go and buy a cheap robot car kit, one of these three-wheeler things, which is quite easy to build, and you think, well, everybody's built it, everybody's done it. Just see it as an achievement to get it going, and that is a success over anybody else's success.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know what? I did those one of those two-wheeled line following robots on a live stream, and I don't think it functioned at first. And then, I went into troubleshooting it live and I got it working. And I'll tell you, when it moved, not only was I happy that I've achieved it, that it worked, but my viewers reacted too. Everybody in the chat was happy for me and not disappointed that I made it work. They were happy. And which is what I feel like is one of the greatest part about the electronics hobby. Most people are super positive and supportive,
Yes.
which is awesome. This is the way it should be. There's no need to gatekeep the electronics hobby. Like if someone had just figured out how to make an LED flash without using the example code, that is a big achievement, and that person might be on to really big things.
Yes. But I think I will emphasize they don't have to be big things. I can remember my father, when he was alive, he suffered from rheumatoid arthritis in his retirement. And he used to say, if he could manage to do the washing up, that was a big achievement, a big success. And that's what kept him going.
Yeah, you have to measure things on a personal scale, not on a global scale.
Yeah, yes, very much so.
Like, for example, for me, just a personal example is I have, when I start something new, I typically have a lot of anxiety about it. So for me, getting the podcast started was something I've been kind of, firing around in my mind for a while. And then getting started on it is a big thing. At the time of recording right now, we are just days away from the launch of episode 1 of this podcast. And I'm telling you, my anxiety is through the roof. But I have to look at it as a success because I have coordinated with a guest, I have recorded, I have edited, exported, uploaded, got the guest to sign off on it, started an account with a podcast service, and everything's going live in a couple days. So that is huge, especially for me because I had anxiety about the whole thing.
Yes, I don't think you're particularly different from anybody else. I think you're probably, a lot of people get very stressed but don't admit it. I think it just happens to everybody. I can imagine the stress you're under at the moment. Is it going to be a success or is it going to be a complete flop?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be a success. You're a good interviewer.
See, you're making me turn red again here, Tim. But no, even, you know what, I have to say, because of the fantastic one-on-ones I've had with my guests so far, of which you're number 6, I feel like the podcast is already a success, whether or not people like it. Because even the friends I have made within YouTube, I knew them, but it had just occurred to me that a bunch of them I've never spoken to one-on-one like this. It was all in text type messages. We didn't really get a chance to share a lot about ourselves and about our process up until these interviews, which is a bit sad because I want to know more about them, and it turns out they want to know more about me. Yeah. And so without the facade of a podcast, I would know even my people that I would consider friends, I would know them even less than I do now.
Yeah. Well, think of this as a start. I hope that we can continue communicating by voice. I'm no good on text messages. I don't like them. I prefer the actual talking to someone, talking to a real person.
Absolutely.
And I enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy talking to people, and I might talk the most utter rubbish, but that doesn't matter.
Yep. So tell me, you wake up in the morning, let's say a random weekday. What does your day kind of look like I'm guessing you're a retiree. You said you're a pensioner, but that doesn't mean you're retired per se, right?
I am a retiree. My day, I get up, have some breakfast. I'm usually awake early. The last few nights, it's been about 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, that's early.
Yes, I'll tend to get up, and I'll probably put on the computer, and I take 2 or 3 papers, digital papers online. I tend to look at those if there's anything I want to read there. I then usually put my feet up and fall asleep for an hour, and then wake up anything domestic needs, so like putting on the washing or whatever, or I need to go shopping. And then I tend to take it as it comes. If I fancy doing some soldering or some programming or whatever, I will do that, especially with the sort of shutdown at the moment.
Yeah, probably
I'm
prudent to stay
trying
home.
to, I try, I watch some YouTube, and I try not to watch too much because it becomes, I think it's quite easy for it to become addictive. You can waste your day watching too many YouTube channels.
I may or
Um,
may not have done that in the past, yes.
yeah, I think we're all being guilty of that. It's the visual media is addictive, whether it's the television or films or YouTube or anything. There's something that draws one's attention all the time. I don't have a planned. I don't have a planned layout. I've always done things on the spur of the moment and things like that. If there's a video from you on the page, I watch that. I watch other videos I've subscribed to, and if it's a mailbag video, as I said to you earlier, it usually ends up me going on eBay and ordering stuff, which is not good for my bank balance.
Yeah, not good for mine either, but thankfully I've got Patreon patrons to cover a little bit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, if you feel like soldering or programming something, you're going to go and do that. What do you
Yeah.
have on your bench right now? What is the latest thing you've soldered?
So at the moment, what I did yesterday, I built, these ultrasonic sensors. I built a radar using using an Arduino, and also processing, which I'm not, it's not original. It was a cut and paste job, but it's success. It first was a success, and I thought, why isn't this working? And it was the fact that I hadn't put the font in the processing.
Ah,
Which, but it was, if you look up sort of radar projects online, there's a lot of similar things. I did that. That was a success. I got it working, and I tend to think I've achieved that. I've got that working. Now I'll go on to something else. I've got a robot car kit which I've had to bits, and these acrylic platforms that they're on.
yep.
It's probably me, and I've always been slightly clumsy, but I always end up breaking part of it.
Is it from over tightening the screws or simply just bending them in an awkward way?
Bending them in an awkward way, putting them on somewhere, I'm turning around and knocking them over. One of the things I suffer from is I'll be using a screwdriver, put it down, turn round, and then I can't find it.
Yeah.
It gets frustrated. So, but one of the things I'm thinking as a result of this, because I find the acrylic is fragile, is thinking of cutting one out of plywood.
Absolutely.
So that's because I've got a scroll saw, and I don't use that enough. So I'm going to trace one out on some plywood and just replace the acrylic thing, or reinforce the acrylic with some plywood. I think it might look nicer in wood.
Probably, yeah. Give it a little bit of an oil coat and it'll make the grain pop out.
Yes. What else have I got? That was a problem. What I ended up doing, it was the day before when I did the radar thing. I got a number of servos that I've sort of collected over the years, and I went. And 4 of them weren't no longer working. I don't know why. I'm going to take them to bits at some point. So I went online and ordered some more. So that hurt.
The little 9-gram blue servos?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? I'm supposed to have a horde of those around here, but I can't seem to find them. They seem to have grown wheels and rolled away, I guess.
I think you showed us around your workshop some time ago, I think, and you're a lot tidier than me. I'm trying to sort stuff out but I'm one of these people. I can clear my desk, clear my bench, and it'd be perfectly tidy. 5 minutes later, it looks as if a bomb has hit it.
I definitely, and the viewers at home can't see me doing this, but I'm winking right now. But I definitely didn't clean up specifically for that video. If you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, my workshop, and I think Big Clive could back me up here if he was on a three-way call with us. My workshop is a constant state of, post-bombing, and I think a lot of creatives are like that because we start things and we don't finish them, and B, we have more stuff than we know what to do with. Like, we'll see the potential inside of an item, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're ready to unleash that potential at this moment.
No, but we get everything ready and fiddle with it and then think, oh, I'll come back to that.
Exactly. And for me especially, because I'll tell you, I feel guilty when I'm working on something and I don't make a video. So sometimes I want to mess with something, but I want to get my reaction live on camera, but I'm not really in the mood to film. I'm not in the right state to film. And then I'll just put it to the side, and then sometimes I'll forget about it, which is quite unfortunate.
Oh, I'm the same, and I'm hoping when I get to do the YouTube stuff I want to do, that I can discipline myself a bit more in that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because when I'm at I've got two actual jobs and a couple of sort of this YouTube thing, but in the actual jobs I have this sort of extrinsic force pushing me to work. Like, for example, I'll make up my courses in advance because I have students that are expecting the delivery of a specific skill or whatever. At my mechanics job, I have customers waiting. The advisors want to go home, and the parts department is waiting. Everybody's waiting. So I have this push to finish. But for YouTube, it's very different because really the motivation has to be intrinsic, has to come from within, because there's nobody out there expecting me to perform, mind you, except for my Patreons. I do kind of feel bad when I don't make videos for a little bit, but I mean, it is what it is. But other than that, like, really, it has to come from within. So some days it's harder than others, but sometimes everything comes together and I'll knock out 4 videos in one day. Sometimes there'll be a couple of weeks between videos. Really depends.
Yes. I, oddly enough, and it's probably because I don't look at I'm very bad at looking at my emails. I'll notice, one of your videos go out and I'll watch it. Then I can't remember which one it was. I watched a video the other day and I thought I hadn't seen this one until it got to the end, and I thought, yes, I have seen it. But I think I have missed some of your videos.
Oh, it's quite possible. There's like 250 of them. Not all of them are good. So
no, that's okay, good. But all you can hope for is that they get better every day.
That's better. Right. That's right. And you know what? That's a very important point. If you look back at your old videos, or let's say you're a poet and you look back at your old poems or whatever, you look at your old work. If you don't say, wow, I wasn't very good back then you haven't progressed. It's entirely normal for you to look back on your old stuff and be like, yeah, that wasn't so good. That's a good thing.
I think one of the things I think with YouTube, though, is there must be a conflict between content and production value in some makers' eyes. And I think it sounds like a criticism almost. You are more attuned to the content, which is the good thing, I think. You get other YouTubers, and it's all about production value. That comes first.
I guess that really depends on what kind of maker that person is. For example, if you look at a channel, there's a machinist called This Old Tony. And he started a YouTube channel being a machinist. However, his YouTube channel quickly evolved into now I would say he's a filmmaker first and a machinist second. And so I would say he's a filmmaker more than he's a machinist. He's a great machinist, but he's an amazing filmmaker. And I think some people enter into YouTube wanting to make videos more so than tinkering with content. So I think some people, their content is the video, and what they're doing in it is kind of secondary.
Yes, I think that's one of the things that appeals to me about Big Clive. He's not so worried about production values. He's very much tuned to content and informing.
Are you saying
comes first?
Are you saying that frying sausages across the mains voltage isn't good filmmaking? Because I would disagree.
I think that's the comedian in him. I think it's the little boy in him almost. It's the person who takes things to bits or wonders what happens if I stick my fingers in the mains.
Yep, that you do get that spirit from him.
Yes, and I think that's the appeal. And I think that's the appeal to him. You know, what happens if I stick 2 forks and 240 volts into a sausage? Oh, it goes bang. And I think that's one of his great appeals. I don't think he could, if somebody could up his production, the actual filming and things like that could be in some ways improved enormously, but you don't want that with him. He's the man in the pub who is entertaining you.
Oh yeah,
his stories and things like this. This is his appeal to me.
I modeled my top-down view on my channel after his, because he makes it work. And if you go look at channels like Dave Jones's on the EEV blog, or Julian Eilert, for example, they do the angled camera thing, but you'll notice that a lot of the shot is out of focus, like because of the sort of large aperture sizes they have to shoot on to get enough light. Sort of like a lot of the scene goes out of focus, and I didn't want to struggle at trying to keep something in focus, especially my eyesight is not very good. So that's the extremely bright lights is what I use. So I use 50 watt equivalent LED on the right hand of the screen. On the left, there's 100 watt equivalent LED. And now, because of feedback, I added a third light kind of like above in the center. And geez, that's at least 20-30 watts of not equivalent, 20 or 30 watts of actual LED power. And so I can get a lot of the scene in focus, and I've also increased the brightness a little bit. But I think the next step now is to try to get some off-axis lighting to try to make it a little bit more simple. I also have to watch my hands because my hands do get in the shot. I know we've spoke about this off the podcast, and you say it's hard to see sometimes with my hands blocking. But I think I have a solution for that. I found a flat screen TV for free $99 basically, and hopefully I'll have a better view of my shot now, and I'll be able to compensate.
Yes, yeah. I think it's practice things like that. It's Big Clive says a thing. Am I still in shot?
Yeah.
Yes, on that. That's it's just sheer practice. Eyesight is my problem as well. Putting DuPont pins, making sure I'm getting them onto the right socket. I have to do counting again. That's one of the banes of old age. Is that my eyesight? I have to use a magnifying glass half the time when I put these together. And the trouble is, when you're looking through a magnifying glass, you're actually not sure where your hand is.
For sure. I bought a magnifying headset. Do you have one of those? Like one of the things with the flip down lenses that go in front of your eyes?
I tried that. Did not work at all. What I've got is one of these, you know what an angle poise light looks like?
Yeah.
You get one, bought it from Banggood, which has got a magnifying glass with a LED light in it.
Yep.
And that works perfectly for me.
Well, that's good.
With that, if I was going to do a lot of serious stuff, I would want a proper soldering microscope, I think. But I'm not into that, and I'm not likely to be into that because my bank balance won't stand that.
Yeah, it's really expensive. They're good optical ones. Like Dave Jones has the Tagano, and that's multiple thousands of dollars. It's beyond the reach of the regular hobbyist.
He's not a hobbyist; he's a professional.
Yep, yeah, but he's been a professional YouTuber now for at least 10 years, I think. So he has. I don't think he's been a quote unquote engineer for quite a while.
I'm not sure about that. I may be wrong for it. I got the impression that he still does self-employed work and things.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know because as far as I knew, he was doing like the only engineering work he was doing was for himself, like designing the microcurrent and getting the Bryman multimeter up and working and stuff like that. But I guess I'm not 100% sure because I only really watch his videos. I don't really follow because I know he has. I think he's on the forums a lot more than he makes videos or something like that.
Yes. Oh, he's got an enormous following, isn't he?
Oh yeah, Dave Jones. I think Dave Jones is he's probably the largest purely electronics YouTuber. I can't think of anybody bigger because even if you think, I mean, Big Clive is like larger than life as far as YouTube electronics goes, but he doesn't have all that many subscribers in a in the broader sense of the YouTube community. He has it's a little bit lower. Yeah, 650,000 subscribers for Big Clive. So it's big, mind you. Like especially looking up from I'm a 5,500-ish subscriber YouTuber, but like the bigger guys, I mean, they have in the tens of millions, several times over what he has.
Oh yes. I mean, one of the things that has amazed me this summer is I used to play a lot of chess when I was young, and I've got back into watching chess online and playing it. And there's a chess channel which is run by an amateur, and he has 750,000 subscribers in a chess channel, and his viewing count is enormous. He produces 2 videos a day.
Wow. There's this weird resurgence. If you go on twitch.tv, which is basically a video game streaming site, there's a huge resurgence of chess. Like right now, chess is big, like very big. And it's weird because it goes in cycles, I find, because it wasn't big for a while, but it is now. If I just go look up the kind of the top categories, chess would be, let's see how many per 6, 12, 18. It's like the 19th or 20th highest game, basically. It's pretty incredible, the resurgence.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this channel. He's produced. This came live 25 minutes ago. It's already had 12,000 views.
Oh my god!
And it's one game of chess.
That's incredible. Just for perspective for the listeners out there, if I go to my videos and I sort it by views. So sorry, how many views and how much time was that video?
I think it's 20 minutes. 12,640 views.
Okay, so I only have 5 videos that have more views than that. And I have 250 videos, so that's quite impressive.
Yes, he's got one. I'm looking at the side thing here. One a month ago, which has got 340,000 views,
and that's higher than my highest video. So that's quite impressive.
Yeah, he's an Eastern European. He plays club chess and things like this. He's one of the biggest chess channels, actually, apart from the actual two or three main ones, chess.com and chess24 and chessable, which are big websites, which also do videos, but they put on competitions and things like this. He's a sort of a club player who puts games online and talks about the games and the strategies and things like that.
That's really impressive. Even on Twitch.tv, there's 35,000 people watching chess at this very moment.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's impressive. And Twitch, the thing that surprises me is that Twitch is traditionally like traditional video games. They don't usually do well for like board games or basically video games which were normal games, like physical games before. So that's why it's really impressive to me.
I think its appeal probably for a lot of people is that it's a way, if you play chess online, going back into chess, you can play, say, a friend online, where you don't do that with video games in the same way. It becomes more of a personal interaction game. And I think that's its appeal.
Yeah, I could see that, because people are definitely socially deprived since the lockdown started.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're just in the sort of like the tail end of the podcast here, and I have a question which I ask all of my guests, and I'd like to field it towards you, if that's all right.
That's all right. Yes, I don't know if I can answer it.
That's fine. You know what? Most people, they're afraid of what's coming, but they come up with an answer. Let's say there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's just all off the top of your head. So the setup is that you get a government grant to start the business of your dreams. And it's a government grant because I want you to think of unlimited funds. Okay, I don't want you to think of this as it has to be charitable. It's just the government says, here's a contract, you start a business of your dreams. So profitability is not a concern to them, really. They just want you to do the business that you would want to do. What kind of business do you start?
A makerspace.
Can you elaborate, like what kind of features your makerspace would have?
The features would what people wanted. So if somebody came in wanting to learn about 3D printing, if there was a market, not a market, if there was people who wanted to learn about 3D printing, things like this, you would be able to have a 3D printer and somebody to teach the 3D printing. Same with CNC machines, sewing machines, cooking, anything that is sort of skill-based, I suppose. What it is, I think, historically, we lived in bigger houses. Modern houses and things are smaller, especially in the UK, and people don't have the space or the money to buy these expensive tools and things. But if they had access to them, I think if there was a place they could have access to them, I think they would come and use them. You could have darkroom, you could photography thing, if that's, anything. That's what I see as a makerspace.
Yeah, that's a fantastic vision.
I don't think that what that needs is, which I'm not the type, it needs some sort of driving force, because some sort of driving force can make that happen anywhere, because they could generate a demand that's there, hidden. I think that if it was unleashed, you'd be forever, there'd be queues of people wanting this access to this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. Does your local library do anything similar, maybe in a more limited fashion?
It's got computers in it. I don't think it's got a 3D printer in it. No, it hasn't. And it's, I don't want it to be. I wouldn't want something like that to be under government control. It's one of the simple things. You're talking about this machinist.
This old Tony. Yeah,
I've watched recently. I think it's called. Is it My Mechanics or something like that? He does restoration work. He's a German, and he's got a lathe and all this sort of thing. And it's if something needs a new part, he makes it. When I was at school, we had metalwork lathes we could use and learn how to use. They're not in schools now, and that's the sort of thing and woodworking lathes. People would love to do that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Sure. I completely agree. I think that's a fantastic idea for a business that doesn't have to worry about profitability, because I feel like something like that could only be funded by a large entity like the government, or by people who are independently wealthy and want to support a sort of like a Patreon type thing, I guess, but in bigger scale. Because
I think with the right sort of person, again, I'm not that person, but the person who think you could probably get a lot of equipment from manufacturers or from as sort of second-hand equipment or new equipment. People got my 3D printer from that thing. I think there's probably a lot of people who are willing to share their skills out there, and it could be ultimately run on say you had 1,000 members or 100, 500 members. You charge them so much a month to be a member, and it would be petty amount of money, but that would probably cover the costs of what you were using.
yeah, quite possibly.
You'd expect people, if I wanted to go in and have stuff 3D printed or some wood cut, I would have to as the user have to pay for my supplies, the raw materials, but I wouldn't be paying for machine time or whatever. I think that would be the basis of it.
Our library here, I live in Ottawa, Ontario, basically the nation's capital, would be, I guess, the equivalent of London for people in the UK. Our library system has a couple of maker type stuff. They have like a video production room with a green screen and cameras and lights. They have a laser cutter. They have a couple 3D printers. And you can go and you can go there and use those machines. I think you have to book a time and all that stuff, but they are completely free to use. I think the 3D printer, you have to pay for the filament, but other than that, like the laser cutter and whatever, it's all just time, so it's all free. So that's pretty good.
How does it work with a 3D printer if it's going to take all night to print?
I've been itching to use it. But the thing is, it's across town. It's probably like Ottawa is kind of sprawled out, kind of widthwise, and I live at sort of one end and it's at the other end. So it's probably a 45-minute drive to get there. So I haven't gone there yet. And now with the corona, I don't think it's accessible anymore. So not really sure the logistics of it, but I know that Pile of Stuff has a library printer as well. But I think for him, he just sends the files, and then they give you a phone call when it's printed. And sometimes it could take weeks, and sometimes it takes days. It just depends on how many jobs are in the queue.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's possibly the way it would work. You say you've got a 3D printer yourself?
I do, yes. I have a Tron XY X3A. Basically it was the cheapest all aluminum machine I could find it on eBay at the time.
Do you use it a lot?
I do. In fact, I really do. Well, I guess I have to define a lot. I find that every time I need something physical that I don't have, I'll design it and I'll print it. I can't have it running all the time, however, because it's in the same room that I shoot videos in. So, I can't have it running while I shoot video because it's quite loud. But aside from that, I'm looking around my desk right now and I've got about, 7 or 8 or 9 things I can see that are 3D printed. So I do use it quite a bit.
I see. It's one of the things I've been wondering whether to get or not.
I'll have to say, if you're into tinkering, get yourself a 3D printer. If you think it's just going to be one of those things, and especially for the viewers at home, if you think it's one of these things that you're going to unpack out of the box and sit on your desk, and whenever the whim comes, you just print whatever you want, 3D printing is not quite there yet. Not at least for these low-priced machines. But if you're okay with having to diagnose the occasional problem, having to tighten the occasional belt, 3D printing probably is for you.
I might talk to you in weeks to come about that.
Yeah, no problem. And in fact, for anyone listening, the current wisdom from people that are smarter than me is to not buy the cheapest 3D printer you can find, like I did, but the Ender 3 V2, not the Ender 3 Pro, but the Ender 3 regular, but V2. is the way to go because you get the most printer for the least cost. And these things, there's so many of them out there that all the problems are very well documented. All the repairs are very well documented. All the upgrade paths and everything, there are tons of them. And basically, it's just the most reliable machine at a reasonable price. I think in Canadian dollars, it's about $330.
Yes, I think it's under 200 here pounds.
Yeah, and if you get it locally, that's even better. What I've found is when you buy something really expensive from China, they tend to ship it DHL or FedEx. So I got mine on eBay. It came from China, and I got it in 2 days after I purchased it.
Yeah, I don't think it's much more expensive from Amazon. I think they keep them in stock.
Yeah, and I don't know how it would work for that, but typically I take more risk when I order from Amazon because their return policies are incredible. But I don't know how you would return a 3D printer, for example, which you've already kind of put wear on. That's a little weird. But yeah, I mean, if you're afraid that it's going to arrive all broken and it's not going to work, then yeah, by all means, go Amazon.
Yes, it's as I say, I want to think about it when I've got the spare cash.
Yeah, so under £200 actually seems fairly reasonable to me for a machine of of what it can do, right? Because I believe I paid just around $200 Canadian for mine, and I sort of wish I would have paid a little bit more and got something a little bit higher quality. But you know what? Even though I have a cheap machine, which is not on the recommended list for anything, I find it's relatively flawless. Like I haven't really done much to it. The bed's been a bit of an annoyance because sometimes things stick too well with some treatments and not well enough with other treatments. It's kind of finding a balance. But other than that, it's been great.
Yeah. Well, actually, we've been going for nearly 2 hours,
Yeah, I think it is. It's probably a good time to wrap it up. So I just want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. And I also want to thank you a lot, Tim, for joining me in this conversation today. I know you've carved out quite a bit of time for me.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I'm so glad you have. And I hope the listeners will join me for the next episode. And I want to thank you all for listening. Have a good one.